looking right at, because she knows I'm next up to speak. But what she said over and over is, at any age, people can change. I wonder, is this true? Is it inevitable? Is it good? And are some of those ages that you can change with better than others? Here's someone who thinks so regarding that last question. Pam, if you're able to share the screen and show, there's this wonderful t-shirt that I wanted you to see. If you can, there you go. Can you read it? It was better being 20 in the 70s. No, being 20 in the 70s was more fun than being 70 in the 20s. And then here's some other people who think there are some ages are better than others. Next slide. If it's too hard, I can just describe it. Oh, you can see the corner of it. It's that Luann cartoon down at the bottom. I'm sorry, I didn't realize how small it was. Can you read it? They can't hear you. Oh. Can you read it? There we go.
Can you read it? Sometimes I want to just stop going to college and start working. And her dad is saying, sometimes I want to stop working and just go back to college.
So I want to focus a minute on, more than a minute, on the part about people can change. I suggest that whether or not they feel like they can, they're going to. They have no choice, and that's due to aging. And you probably all knew that. Here are some changes with age from my own life, just to kind of illustrate. I aged into adolescence and managed to get through it. That was challenging, exciting, nerve-wracking. Somehow I survived. I aged into adulthood. Lots of challenges, new opportunities, things to learn. I aged into middle age when I needed to take into account that ordinary physical activities like sports or working around the house can cause injuries, not from accidents, but just by trying a little too hard. I aged into senior status professionally, which for me as a professor meant senior faculty. And this is when one often takes on some leadership roles and perhaps becomes a mentor to younger people. But it also involves a lot more weighty responsibility. Then I aged into what we usually think of as senior status, i.e. a senior citizen. Retirement, more choice of how to spend my time, the chance to do some things that I missed. Still enough energy? Nice. At the same time, I did have to realize that various random, unexpected medical setbacks become a simple reality of life. I was lucky and am lucky that mine have been manageable, but I do have to learn how to manage them. And that takes some time, and I spend increasing amounts of my time doing that. And then I aged into what some people call true old age. You can pick your age, but Adair told you mine, and it's there. When people offer to help you with your bag, they look surprised if you say, I'll take the stairs, never mind the elevator, and hope against hope, maybe they think you have some wisdom worth sharing. So ironically for all this, lots of people won't admit to aging, right? Now, I think I got disproved a little bit on that by this morning's story. But did you notice Ruth did ask each adult, is it okay if we put down your age? And in this ritual of children's stories, and I don't know how many times I've heard it said, for all you who are young or young at heart. And so everybody's, oh yes, I'm young at heart. You're only as old as you feel, common expression. 50 is the new 40. Or is it the other way around? I never can keep that straight. Or as Judith Fjord's title has it, I'm too young to be 70. So a lot of these changes are pretty common, and they're imposed on us, as I said, but a lot of them involve explicitly learning some new things. So I want to think for a while about learning some new things. And once again, using my own life as an example, here are a few things I had to learn at various stages. How to live with a spouse. I was married at age 23, and believe me, despite the example of observing my parents, who were very good parents, I really had no clue. Nor did I have the wisdom to resort to another of Judith Viorst's maxims in the book about being 80. It's called How to Stay Married. Whenever you try to recount all the hurts, disappointments, betrayals, and grievances that assail you, may your memory fail you. Then a little later, there was becoming a parent. That one is so obvious and so much written about, and advice, I don't think I'll dwell on it. And then comes, for me, starting a career. And in my case, as I mentioned, that meant becoming a professor. So this was in my early 30s. As a student, I was in awe of professors. I was always a student who really admired knowledge. And so I thought, well, how could I be one? And there are other jobs open to economists, so it wasn't a sure thing that I was going to become a professor, but it did indeed happen. And I had a lot of mental adjusting to do of my own status in the world. As well as, of course, many, many skills to try to learn. Believe me, it was not just applying what I learned in my education. Then, maybe another decade later, I started getting into managing people. So I got into administration a bit. I was appointed an associate dean. This is all while still being a regular faculty member, and later chair of my department. And lucky for me, for the associate dean part, I had a really good mentor who was the dean, who wanted me to succeed and took pains to help me observe himself as he went about through his jobs and how certain things can get resolved that might be comparable to situations that I would face. Then in another decade, in my 50s, I became president of a church, not this one, but one that Adair and I attended in Southern California. And as it turned out, this was a much bigger church than this one. As it turned out, this required some of the same skills as administering a group of faculty. I think Philip will know what I'm talking about. In both cases, you have a bunch of opinionated, independent-minded, smart people. And so, of course, it's like herding cats. And if any of you had cats, you don't do this by command and control, right? You do it by trying to create incentives that make people want to act in a way that further the goals that you think are best for the organization and for all those involved in it. So then moving on, I became a grandfather. One of my great pleasures. I learned, again, I had to learn something, how to interact as an adult to a small child who I wasn't, strictly speaking, in charge of. So it's different from being just a parent. And in my case, I also had to learn how to deal with a very rambunctious little boy because we only had a girl in our own life. And so I hadn't experienced that as a father. And the same young boy now, I very recently had to learn how to interact with a young man who still views me as his own grandfather. Our grandson is now 18 and moved on and is attending college. Of course, each of these learning stages involved expanding my horizons. And I'll give you one more example of that. is not particularly oriented toward a particular age. I'm fairly musical, as many of you know, but being comfortable on a piano, as I am, does not automatically extend to being comfort singing, especially if you ever stand up in front of a congregation and sing by yourself. So at age 66, I was involved in a choral group, two choral groups actually, which I liked a lot. And I had always regarded myself as kind of the support person. I'm good at finding the notes. I'm good at getting the right rhythm. And all these people around me, which in one of these cases were music students, they're the ones who can make beautiful sounds. So I say, okay, I'll give them the note and the rhythm, and then they can make the nice sounds. But I decided I'd like to make nice sounds too. And so I took voice lessons for about 4 years, and it really transformed my confidence in singing in a chorale, and it even gave me confidence so that I could sing a solo, which I've done now and then on occasion. There was a time when if I was part of a solo or once even a trio of people, just for a short section, I practically fainted from hyperventilation. So this was something worth learning. And of course, any of you who've had voice lessons, it's a lot of very specific skills, and you are really learning to do some things. It's not just somehow magically making your voice sound nicer. I do want to call your attention, before I leave the topic of learning new things, to a difficulty that we're negotiating, that we need to negotiate as we age. And although it's not entirely new, I think it's become substantially harder in our area. And it's this. One way we learn things is to observe around us for clues, and in particular, when we're thinking about aging and learning how am I going to manage whatever that next phase is, going to college or being a professor or this. Often we can look at older people that we know, friends, siblings, maybe parents, and okay, this is how they handled that situation. That's, or maybe you see some who didn't do such a good job, and you say, okay, I'm going to avoid that, I'm going to do this. But in many situations, there's now a catch, which is that the world is changing, even as we do. And that's always been true, but I think more often it was true like on a generational basis. So yes, every young generation has said, my parents are old fuddies, I'm not going to do what they do. But now you have to think about your next older sibling in the same way, or your friend. Like if you're a freshman in high school or college, and you've got a friend who's a senior, and you think, oh, I'm going to watch them. How do they navigate the exit from this into career or whatever comes next? And suddenly you're a senior and the world has changed. Think if you're in computer science and your friend was going to be a coder and figured out how to do that. You get to there and artificial intelligence is doing those jobs. You've got to completely rethink from scratch what would make you a successful graduate of this field. There are, of course, many other areas besides artificial intelligence that are changing the world very rapidly, and I think they disorient us too. In biotechnology, for example, it not only affects our medical care, mostly for the better, I think, but it introduces brand new social and ethical issues, which everybody's struggling with, issues around reproduction, gender, genetic manipulation. We can't really look to our parents very well, or even our older friends sometimes, for ideas about what to do with these situations because they're coming so new. So it's hard enough watching yourself changing due to age, but it's downright disorienting to do it while the world is changing too, and ever faster. And I submit that this is going ever faster than it has before, due largely to technology and rapid communications. In fact, my theory of what's behind a lot of the widespread angst, which everyone seems to agree affects the entire world now, is this disorientation. The world is changing rapidly. When it changes faster than we age, than the changes that we're used to from aging, we don't know how to cope. And some people just, it really disorients them and they don't know what to do. There's no stable point of comparison. And one reaction, sadly, is to look backward toward an imagined time when everything was stable, you knew what to do, you had older role models, and everything was great. And we like to imagine that we can recreate that sense of comfort. I don't have a solution to all this. I will come back to a few pieces of advice in a bit, but let me move on to another aspect of learning new things and mastering new skills, which is, what does it mean to expand your comfort level in this way to new venues? It's commonly called personal growth, and I want to spend the rest of our time thinking about that kind of growth. So we're right back to the subject of the children's story. Growing up, different ages, and we all go through this all our life. So growth can take you by surprise. You sail along in life thinking nothing much is really going on, and suddenly you realize you're different than before. Maybe you've developed a new taste for new types of music, or maybe you've figured out how to love someone that you didn't realize you did. Or maybe you've developed a new understanding of religion, of religious language, one that changes how you view the world. Many people in UU churches have experienced this at some point in their lives, at many different ages. It might happen in a negative way, when you become disillusioned with a church that you've been in before. It might happen in a positive way as you discover a church where the approach to religion resonates with you. And it can happen in both ways at the same time. Kathleen Norris, an author who's a professional poet, in her book Dakota, describes how she left her home church in her 20s. This was mainly a mainline Protestant church. She lived an exciting life in Manhattan as a creative poet, being very hip and into the intellectual scene, only to return 20 years later to the home church, not even of her own home church, but the home church of her grandmother in South Dakota. Could you get any different from Manhattan? And it's even a small town in South Dakota. But now she had a completely different understanding of what the ritual and the language used in that church meant, to her at least. And along the way, speaking of expanding your horizons, she discovered the joy of ritual in a Catholic monastery, which at least some of them, this one in South Dakota, welcomes lay people in various ways as visitors, or in her case, as kind of regular participants. She was called became what's called a lay oblate. This was totally outside her previous religious history, but she found it nourished not only her soul, but even her profession. It nourished her sense of poetry. She found the entire ritual and orderliness and repetition, not to mention that a lot of it involved actually reading poems from the Psalms. All of this helped her develop her own sense of where poetry went. So to me, Norris's story is a profoundly moving glimpse at how opening your heart and mind to a new way of looking at religion can bring true enriching growth to your life. And she could not have done it at age 20. It took those additional decades of growth and experience and aging to make her open to that experience. So could aging itself be connected with religion? Here's a clue. Just like growth is about change, so is religion. People are born again, right? Preachers urge people to transform their worldview. and not just in evangelical churches, the newly adopted Principles and Covenant of members of the Unitarian Universalist Association includes these words: we covenant to collectively transform and grow spiritually and ethically. And here's a comment by the late Marcus Borg, a scholar of Christianity who specializes in research into the historical person, Jesus of Nazareth, trying to understand who this person was as best as possible. He summarizes what he views as Jesus' central mode and purpose of his ministry. As a teacher of wisdom, Jesus was primarily a teacher of a path of transformation. Transformation from what to what? Well, from conventional wisdom into a fuller life. And he describes in some detail what he means by a fuller life. But what's wrong with conventional wisdom? Borg says it's the whole way that we intuitively stack up people around us into hierarchies. This is what he sees Jesus as fighting against. A way of making ourselves comfortable about where we stand and how to act. This, according to Borg, leads to a life of profound self-preoccupation with how well we're doing, with our identity. And he thinks it depresses people. It is not a comfortable place. And here's the rub. This conventional wisdom, which danger is lurking, right? Is exactly what we're, according to Borg, again, what we're socialized into through the process of growing up. So one of the things when you grow up is you learn the nuts and bolts of how to live, and that's conventional wisdom. And obviously it has its uses. But so we're back to growing up, but this time with a warning. It can not only expand your horizons, but it could narrow your horizons. So you need to be alert to the process in yourself and be trying to help shape it in what you think is a positive direction. So with all this in mind, finally, I do have some advice to a person wanting to deepen their spiritual lives or simply wanting to cope as we get older. First of all, try to keep up with the world and its changes as best you can. You'll never fully succeed, but it's better to know something than to be completely clueless. Second, pay attention to the internal changes within yourself due to your own aging process. Try to understand them, what's going on. Try to accept them when you have to. Try to adjust where you can and need to. And remember, some even have their compensations. When you get to be my age and you need someone to cut you some slack, you can just say, hey, look, I'm 80. And things get easier. And my third one is, a piece of advice, is maintain a social network for mutual support. And of course, everyone in the world who writes about old people will tell you that's the most important thing to maintaining your well-being. And in fact, it turns out it's probably the most important factor for happiness from those people who study surveys about that at any age. But for the processes that I'm talking about, it helps because we can figure this out better together than we can one at a time. So for myself, I'm going to try to follow that advice, keep up as best I can, pay attention, and I'm counting on you to help us all work through this together. And if you would turn to